Hey everyone, it's Kary Oberbrunner, and I have with me a very special guest. In fact, I am thrilled about her. This is Dr. Wilborn, and she is the author of a very cool forthcoming book called Playing a New Game. She's passionate about wellness, and we're going to get right into it, Dr. Wilborn. So, talk to us about the background of your book. Like, when did you first think about it? Why did you decide to write it? What's it about? These types of things.
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me, Carrie. I'm so happy to be able to join you all at the Soul Symposium. You know,
Yes.
anybody that's talking about truth, I'm here for it. So,
Yes.
um, I think if I could sort of tie the book to the theme of the symposium is that I want to be able to introduce the little T truth
Mm,
that when Black women experience race and gender stereotypes in the workplace, not only is it a professional issue, right? Like we understand workplace discrimination and the impact professionally that can have on hiring, retention, promotion, all the things, right? Um, but what has been talked less about, particularly in the public sphere, and therefore the reason why this book exists in the first place is because we don't talk enough about the wellness implications of those race and
mm,
gender stereotype experiences, for specifically the ways in which those experiences impact Black women mentally and physically. So, the
mm.
goal of Playing a New Game, a Black woman's guide to being well and thriving in the workplace, is really to expand the dialogue in this area,
Yep.
to talk specifically about the ways in which these workplace experiences are also a wellness issue or
Mm,
creates or leads to wellness issues, and seeks to offer evidence based self care and self empowerment strategies as tools for Black women's knapsacks to sort of journey on their professional um, journey, if you will.
yes.
So that's sort of the big picture. But then I want to kind of back up just for a second, if I may, because I always knew I love words. I've always loved words. I've always been a reader. My mother says I've always ran my mouth. Oftentimes, it got me in trouble. Thankfully, now
Sure.
it's led to some good.
Yes.
Um, but this book really started as me search. It started as an experience I had as a clinical leader,
Mm,
working for a large nonprofit and finding myself uh, in the midst of an experience of workplace discrimination, and having to navigate that mentally
wow.
and physically, the impact of that. Um, it also that experience happened to be coinciding with my doctoral studies at UNC Charlotte, and so uh, my attempt to really understand this experience, which I like to call my me search, became my research. And
I
so
like that.
uh,
Research.
yeah,
Good.
my me search, right? Because I think part of truth, for us to get to the truth, we have to do a bit of me search, right? And we have to be
Yes.
open to what we find.
Yes.
And so part of that me search led to research, and ultimately, my dissertation looked at the experiences of low income Black women with race and gender stereotypes in the workplace. And so the book then, it weaves together, if you will, my me search, my research, and also my clinical practice as a mental health therapist.
Wow. So let's talk about that for a little bit because you said several things that I think are really exciting. One, you talked about a capital T and a lowercase t truth. And the reason why I'm excited about that is because on social media, we posted a little graphic about we symposium, the truth will set you free. And somebody, you know how people comment, somebody commented, how can you know the truth? Or how do you know my truth? Or something like this. And
Sure.
people always post whatever they want. But I commented, I said, thank you for your comment. I said, I believe that there are two truths. I said, I believe that there is a lowercase t truth and an uppercase t truth. And, who knows whether they'll get that or not. But I love that you said that because there is this. I believe, not everyone will agree with me, but I believe there's this absolute truth that exists out
Mhm.
there. I believe in my own faith journey that, truth is a person. But I also believe that there's a lowercase truth, and the lowercase truth doesn't always agree with the uppercase truth. For example, I might say on a really bad day, life is horrible. I want to end my life. I feel so bad. I'm done with everything. The world's against me. That's how I feel. That's a
Mhm.
lowercase t truth.
Mhm.
But it might not resonate with the upper T truth case. So talk
Sure.
to us about that. Can you talk to us about your book specifically and this uppercase, lowercase truth?
Sure. So I love this idea of lowercase, uppercase truth, and it's actually something I would talk as a therapist. So actually, I'm now retired
Ooh,
from clinical mental health practice. Did that work for 21 plus years, but I think that idea of lowercase, uppercase truth, or I call it big T, little T
oh
truth,
yeah, there you go.
really sort of emerged from my practice because I think what often causes a lot of soul sickness and suffering is people trying to make sense of truths that have been given to them as big T truths that
Interesting.
don't quite line up with the life that they are living or
Ooh,
even deserve or want to have. And so there's this sort of incongruence, if you will, between
yeah,
what people have been told is big T truth versus their little T truth, which is equally important, if you will. So, for example, I often like to say that there are very few big T truths, right? I think most of us could agree that a big T truth is we were all born,
yes,
right?
yeah,
Well, I guess it depends on who you talk to, but I think most people would certainly agree that we
yeah,
were all born, and I think most people will agree that we will all die. Again, there might be some divergence in where you go, but I
sure,
think those are sort of big T truths. I
yeah,
think what happens in between is a lot of little T stuff, right? I agree. I sort of share, if I heard you correctly, I will label that for me, God, you didn't label
yep.
uh,
I agree.
big T in that particular way. But for
Yep,
me, God is a big T truth.
that's the
I
truth.
also recognize that for others, God is not true, is neither true, nor is God a little T true.
Yep.
Where we are able to find harmony, I think, is in respecting that there are big T truths,
Yes.
if we could say, right? But what we think those are, we may disagree on.
Mm,
But can we hold space for the little T truths, which is, in my opinion, each of our lived experiences of humanity?
yes.
And I think part of, again, tying it back to the book, is that if we think about it from the idea of truth, big T, little t, is that there is an experience, a lived experience that Black women have in the workplace that because of race, even though we know race is socially constructed, race has real life implications for people who experience race as especially as people of color, right?
Yeah.
That in the workplace, for example, race and gender has real life lived implications for the ways in which Black women are perceived and treated, and therefore has implications for them professionally and personally. But
Mhm.
when I say that, that is not to the exclusion of other people's truths and or lived experiences.
That's
And
good.
I think where we get into these difficult conversations that we can't seem to sort of come to a space of harmony and agreement about is we don't understand or see that both and can exist, right?
Yeah.
That this can be true for me, that this cannot be true for you, and yet they are both true, and that is okay. What we
Yeah.
often want to do is it's not true for me, and therefore your truth does not exist.
Interesting. Oh, that's good. That's good. And this is the whole reason why I wanted you on this Soul Symposium, why our team invited you, because it's one thing to say that we are willing to have conversations. It's another thing to actually have a conversation. And I'll be the first one to admit, as a white male, that I wanted to take a position of learning today. And I don't know what it's like. And I don't know some of the hurdles that you've had that I don't even know exist. In fact, I want to share a real quick comics little illustration that I saw the other day. It had three women on a track. This is a cartoon drawing, and it had three men on a track. Now,
Hmm.
of course, this might offend some people, and of course, this is stereotypes, but it had the men on the track. They're all in suits, and it said the truth, the truth about workplace gender. And it had the men able to just sprint ahead with zero hurdles. And then with the women, it had a baby crib, laundry, food prep, whatever. And
Hmm.
I looked at that and I'm like, "Wow, that's interesting." Now, again, we can say, "Whoa, whoa, what about the stay-at-home dad?" And I'll tell you what I felt inside me, when I saw that. One is I'm like, "That's interesting." Two is I said, "Well, I got up with the kids in the middle of the night, and I helped change the diapers." But then I thought, "You know what? My wife does so much more." And I'm in her office. She's a counselor, and we met in grad school. So the point is this, Dr. Wilborn, you're right. I'm not. I'm not a woman, and they do have expectations and stereotypes. And talk to us about that. What does a woman have that a guy doesn't even have a clue about? And then what does a black woman have, as you mentioned? Talk to us, because I want to learn.
Thank you. I appreciate the position of learning. I think um, that is the value of diverse humanity is we get to learn. And again, if you believe in God, I certainly
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Diversity is biblical,
Yes.
right? It is
Yes.
biblical. And so if there were no need for diversity, God wouldn't have created it. But,
Yeah.
that's if you believe that kind of thing.
I believe it.
Um, so interestingly enough, I saw the same graphic,
Did
right?
you see
And
that?
I did see it because it's on
Wow.
social media, right? So
Yeah.
things are kind
Yeah.
of floating around and things get trendy quick. So I saw that and thought, interesting. I also thought, again, my lens is black woman. So I thought, so what's missing is something that looks
Diversity.
like a person of color.
Yes.
What is missing is also perhaps someone who has disability, someone who identifies as part of a sexual minority group, right? And so um, I thought that, right, that there's, yes, for those women who identify as mothers and or have roles associated with, you know, domestic roles, if you will, for lack of a better
Yeah.
way of saying that, that is a barrier. And then when we look at ourselves as intersectional beings, all women are not mothers, right?
Yeah.
Some women anatomically, um, biologically have right women. So we're talking about women who are transgender women, right? So there's so many other aspects of our identity that create hurdles. And therefore, it makes it difficult to say this is the experience of this particular group, which I think is the danger of stereotypes, is that there's
Yes.
this sense of individuals who are a part of group membership as monolithic, when
Yeah.
in fact, there is much more variety within group than there is
Mm.
across group. And
Wow.
so, right, like there's, so within, again, if we go gender, it's gender, but again, it's also race, it's also citizenship status, it's language, it's
Sure.
education, right? There's all of these different intersections of identity that create this diverse being,
Wow.
um, and that is by design.
Yeah.
And so I think going back to your point of, and this is something that I really think is important.
Yeah.
You said this, but I think it jogged a thought in my mind that I think is important to note. We talk a lot about privilege, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's a thing that we've come up with.
Yeah.
But I think what's important to understand about privilege is that privilege just creates blind spots, right? So it doesn't make, for example, I have physical ability. I have some invisible disabilities, but my visible ability, I have some invisible disabilities. I have some visible abilities. So, for example, I am able bodied. I can get up from this chair and move about my natural space without concern about what barriers may exist in the environment for me to move freely, right?
Sure.
I can be reasonably sure that as an able bodied person, there are much of the environment is set up for me to move through,
There
right?
you go.
I don't have to think about how much time do I need to give myself to figure out is there elevator access? I don't have to think about is this building or this space accessible to me at all. I don't have to think about that because as an able-bodied person,
Interesting.
my privilege as an able-bodied person creates a blind spot
Oh,
that
that's good.
I don't see. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm not concerned for those who are physically who
Yeah.
are differently abled.
No, that makes
But what
sense.
it does mean, right? But what it does mean is there are things that I am not thinking about, not because I'm a bad person, but because my privilege in this particular area of ability creates a blind spot.
That's
And
so good.
so it's not about me trying to deny or denounce that I have ability in this
Sure.
area, but it's about how do I leverage that privilege, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, if I'm in a, and I'll stop talking here in a second, but if I'm in the bathroom stall, here's one way that I can leverage my ability. I choose every time I'm in a bathroom stall, I choose not to go into the bathroom stall that is designated for those who have quote unquote handicap.
Yeah.
I will wait and let people, if you want to go use the handicap bathroom, you are free to do that. But as a person who is able bodied,
That's a good
I
example.
understand that there is someone who will need that stall that I'm using just because it's convenient, but for them, it's a necessity.
That's a
So I
good.
think, does that make sense?
Oh,
Like, I
yeah.
think,
So
yeah.
good. That's listen, that is I gotta say this. That is the best illustration I've ever heard on this
Mm,
topic. And here's why. Because I think as a white male, when my friends who are white males hear about diversity, some of them who aren't
mm-hmm,
who aren't as emotionally intelligent might say, well, what do we need to do? We just all need to, like, I can't help it. You know, what I'm supposed to feel bad. Like, there's a lot of this pressure
mm-hmm,
in our world today. But I like what you said. You said because you're able body, you're not a bad person.
mm-hmm,
You just said you don't spend the time thinking about the elevator access, the rails, the whatever, the climate. I mean, it's a blind spot. I love that. I love that. It's a
mm-hmm.
blind spot. That's huge. I think that yeah, and we didn't even get into mental health. So, because in that cartoon, how would you illustrate that? I'm a guy who struggled for years with depression and even self-injury. So I was a cutter, and
Mm-hmm.
yet, how do you illustrate that? Like you said, we all have these invisible challenges, and we didn't even get into that. So I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm gonna take a step back and look at your amazing book here. Playing a new game, is that what it does? Does playing a new game help us see our blind spots? What do you think?
Well, so thank you for that question because, even though I'm retired from mental health, I am like mental health
Oh yeah,
advocate, right?
yeah,
Um, I, I'm going to bracket the mental health piece
Sure.
I'm going to swing back into it through talking about the book,
Sure.
because part of the book is so part of the new playing a new game is about prioritizing wellness. So, for example, oftentimes part of the ways in which Black women in particular have been mentored and guided um, in terms of navigating workplace experiences to sort of mitigate the harm of discrimination is you hear things like you have to work twice as hard as them. You have to never let them see you sweat, right? So there's something mentally going on with
Right.
you. You
Sure.
can't not show that because, that's
Yeah.
it could be perceived as a weakness or it could count against you.
Yeah.
And my absolute favorite that I have heard across my career is you've got to play the game.
Interesting. Yeah. What does that mean? I've never heard that.
Right. Right. And you probably didn't be as a white male,
Yeah.
right? Because it was if we go there, then we could say that it was set up for you to already win,
Sure.
right? So the problem with playing a new game as advice and as a tool is most people who have been told that didn't know what it meant either. I never really knew what playing the game meant,
Mm.
particularly because if there were some specific rules to the game, because I didn't have the power to control them, they could always change, right? So the guidepost could always move in terms of how I win. The problem with playing the game, if you will, particularly as a woman of color or people who have been told that as a tool, is that it requires additional labor, right? There's additional labor. There is a tax. It is mentally, physically, social, spiritually, and otherwise taxing. First of all, to try to figure out what is the game that I'm playing, but to then play it on top of what I'm already being tasked
Wow.
to do. Oftentimes, especially for Black women, overtasked and undercompensated. And so, playing a new game is this idea of the messaging that playing the game, that messaging is antiquated.
Interesting.
Not only is it antiquated, it's injurious, right? There is injury. You use the term injury. There is an injury that occurs when Black women try to play a game for which they were never intended to win. So the new game is we are not playing that game. The new game is we are approaching our workplace experiences from a place of wellness, of thriving. And the tools that are imparted in the book are intended to promote twofold. One, to promote self care as a strategy, and two, self empowerment
Mm.
as a strategy towards thriving in the workplace and beyond.
That's cool. Can you give us an example of a tool? Because I think your word pictures are really powerful. Is there any type of tool that you comes to mind?
Sure. So I always like to say, I'll give you two. How about that? You get a bonus. I always start the conversation of wellness around taking care of the basics. Uh, Mental health is physical health. Physical health is mental health. They
Mm.
are one and the same. So, because if you're mentally unwell, we know that there are physical implications of that, right? If you're experiencing depression, for example, you may not be sleeping as well.
Sure.
Your diet habits may be disrupted. We know that with depression, anxiety is comorbid with this. So oftentimes people who have depression are often also experiencing anxiety. And so one of the tools that I submit uh, offer in the book and is actually the first tool is take care of the basics, and the basics is mental and physical health. And so I talk specifically about different strategies that promotes what I like to say peace and clarity.
Mm.
But then I talk about physical wellness, so some of that is making sure that you're getting enough sleep. If your computer you're on a computer, I'm on a computer. We know our computers have sleep functions. when those sleep functions are enabled, right? The computer is shut off. It's not completely shut off, but it's sort of, the operation of the computer has been paused. And
Yes.
then when we disable the sleep function, the computer resumes its normal functioning. So I always like to say, if your computer has a sleep function, why is it that you think you
Ooh,
don't need
that's
sleep?
good. That's good.
So the first chapter talks about taking care of the basics, and then
Wow.
the one of the other tools. This is the second tool. I talk about the importance of the. I think the chapter here is "No" is a complete sentence.
Mm,
That chapter really gets into the importance of boundaries,
yes.
right? That when we do not set and reset and maintain healthy boundaries, again, it comes with the cost mentally and physically. And so I talk specifically about the importance of setting boundaries, and I actually walk people through how to set healthy personal and professional boundaries. So
That's
take care of the
good.
basics, healthy boundaries.
I'm starting to see the book now. I'm starting to see it because you're basically saying, just to repeat to the audience here, you're basically saying that Black women have been told that there's a certain game they have to play to advance.
Yes.
In that game, the rules are some of them, like you just said, and that is so clear. Never let them see you sweat, never ask for help, always show up early. I mean, you could just boom, 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 boom.
Mm-hmm.
Never leave late, never take a sick day, you
You
know,
got it.
boom, 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 all this stuff. So you got to play a game. Some of the game are these rules. And yet, what I hear you saying is if anyone follows these rules, never sleep, never take care of yourself, everyone will lose. I mean, that's a human thing. Like last time I checked, any human that doesn't sleep is gonna die, right? So
Exactly.
you're basically saying for Black women, we need to not even rewrite the rules. We need to play a new game. I love that analogy. That's so good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, talk to us about that. So
I was gonna say, can I jump in
yeah,
there?
do that.
Yeah, you got it right. You hit it.
Mm,
Because the danger of stereotypes is they dehumanize those who are subject to them.
oh, that's good.
So if you right, so because you said everybody needs sleep, everybody absolutely, humans need sleep.
Yeah.
The problem, and this is specifically why this book gets into the particular emphasis of stereotypes, is that what, and this is where I bring the research into bear, is we know that stereotypes affect the perception and treatment of those who are stereotyped.
Mm,
And in the case of Black women, and so I also tie, because again, you cannot, and people, we're sort of in a space where we're like, well, why do we have to talk about this? But it's difficult to understand contemporary experiences without an understanding of the history. And
okay.
I think part of why we cannot hear the truth is some of the truth has been omitted. One
Mm,
of the things that we know as it relates to Black women's labor experiences is their experiences as enslaved workers, right? And so part of the reason why stereotypes is even a thing is that stereotypes emerged as a way to distort the lived experiences of how Black women and girls, because let's be clear, enslavement was enslavement, particularly as it relates to labor and sexual exploitation during slavery, that occurred with women and girls, right?
mm,
So right? But a lot of us haven't learned that, right? Like
no,
I didn't really learn about slavery, and I'm just putting it out there because we talk about the truth to set you free.
yeah,
I didn't really learn about it until I mean, I heard about it,
sure.
and I'm a Black woman,
Yeah,
right, from the South, until I went to college and took a class.
interesting. Yeah,
Why? Because education, and I'm gonna circle back around, Kara. So just I'm a retired therapist, so my
you're good.
brain is like spaghetti. My
Yeah.
everything weaves together.
I can
Um,
I can resonate. I'm with you.
yeah. So for me, part of uh, drawing the connection to these contemporary experiences and specifically the role of stereotypes, I had to go back and look at the research and see why they came to be in the first place. And again, it was an attempt to distort at a very basic level the humanity of these enslaved women and girls. And so going when we sort of parlay to now, you say, well, everybody needs sleep. Everybody, absolutely. The danger of stereotypes, though, is that they distort and dehumanize the humanity, specifically as we're talking about, of Black women. So
Wow.
if I come to you as a you're a white, you identify as a white male employee, and I'm a Black woman, and I come to you and say, I need to take a mental health day, Kary. I'm dealing with depression. Um, I need to take this day. If you are someone who cannot see my humanity,
Mm,
follow me here. If you cannot see my humanity as a Black woman, you cannot see my pain.
mm,
And so your response to my requests will like will not likely be one of empathy and concern and support if you don't see me as someone who can even have pain. If you
mm.
don't even see my humanity, you can't see my pain.
I
So
see.
that request might be denied, right? Well, we all have a tough day, right? So just suck it up. But if you understand
Mm,
that there is an experience that while it may be there is a collective experience of humanity, if we understand truth as little t truth
yep.
and my life as a little t truth, then you will understand that there might be something particular about my experience that needs to be attended to. And it's not so much that there needs to be preferential treatment, but there does need to be an understanding that me as a Black woman, my life looks a little bit different, even as from a woman who is white. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
I don't even know where we were with the
Oh yeah.
question, but I hope that I'm somewhere
No, it
in
totally
the
makes
realm of
sense.
where you asked.
Totally makes sense. So, as a former minister, as a person of faith, you're speaking my language because if I say I follow Jesus and do not have empathy for uh, people who are different than me, I mean, look at Jesus. Samaritan woman, tax collector. You know, he had no filters. Like, I think the scriptures are clear that he went out of his way to be empathetic to people that in that culture, the woman who had the bleeding disorder or leprosy, all these things. Wow. I mean, you're speaking truth. I want to take just 60 seconds and tell people, listen, if you found Soul Symposium, you might say like, what in the world is this? This is a great conversation. That's what it is. I looked at what's going on in our world and I said, listen, the world needs experts to talk on 5 topics. And we didn't even pick Dr. Wilborn because of diversity. We picked it because of wellness. And I love that. And yet within wellness, you have the lens of Black woman in the workplace. And you came highly recommended from another fantastic speaker, Katrina Ubell. And I'm falling more in love with your publisher because your publisher seems to be publishing really good, relevant books. But folks, I want to tell you that if you are finding value in this, just like I am, you need to pre-order Dr. Wilborn's book. And I'll tell you why. Not only is it going to be amazing, not only is it going to take you deep into those tools and practices, and it's going to give you a much more broad view, which will help you in work and life. But here's what else is cool. When you get Dr. Wilborn's book and the other 4 speakers, you basically just send us your receipt and you get some incredible bonuses, including a conference ticket that's valued at $400. So great purchase, folks. Get her book. It's somewhere on this page. pre-order it as well as the other speakers. Dr. Wilborn, is this your first book? Is it? I know in the academic world you probably wrote lots of things. Is this your first official book?
This is my first official book. I've actually written some book chapters, counseling journals, but this is my
Yeah.
debut book, and I'm very excited about it.
Well, we are excited for you. What do you hope that the book does? I know that as someone who's written whatever a dozen books, I mean, it is grueling. Blood, sweat, tears, research, sacrifice. You don't do that unless there's a big payoff. What do you hope happens?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think it's an important question. I think for me, there's a couple of things. First of all, I hope that for the intended audience, right? Because there's always the intended, and then there's the folks who go, let
Ooh,
me
that's good.
see what she's talking about.
Yeah.
So for the intended target audience, my hope is that they find a book that makes them feel seen,
Ooh, that's good.
heard, cared for, and that they find relevance and relevance and utility, usefulness in the book, right?
Yeah.
Because one of the things that's beautiful about Balance, which is the publisher under Grand Central,
Yeah.
is the imprint under Grand Central Publishing, which is part of Hachette Book Group, is that Balance publishes books that are practical, right?
Mm,
That you have these amazing voices and authors bringing to the space their expertise and their experience, but they're doing so in a way that uh, you have tools that you can actually use. It's kind of like therapy, right? You show up for therapy and you're like, I have this issue, and the therapist is like, well, I don't have any answers for you, but I'll help you find your way.
wow,
And you're
that's
like,
good.
no, I need tools. What do I do when this depression kicks in?
Yeah.
So going back to the question, I hope that the readers find
Mm,
tools that they can actually use and do something with.
yep.
Because this book is really meant to be helpful at work and beyond.
Mm,
For those who are not necessarily the target audience, so for those, for example, who employ Black women or who are concerned with, if I hope I have your permission to say this.
you can say
I'm
whatever you
gonna
want.
I'm gonna assume I have your
Say
permission.
whatever you want.
When we were having our pre-symposium call and sort of sorting through the invitation for me to join
Yeah.
you all, one of the things that you said that I thought was so powerful and was really the reason why I said yes to this, right? Was you said if there is someone who is not concerned about the experiences of Black women, this may not be the symposium for them. Right?
Yes.
This may not be an
Oh
event for them. That stuck with me
yeah. Yeah. Wow.
because we have shared humanity. And if
Yeah.
we can hold space for the idea that there is a collective experience of humanity,
Mm,
and because of God's omniscience in his design, he made us. I give God gender,
yeah.
uh, right? We can have that's a whole different
Yeah.
conversation.
Right.
But
Right.
in his omniscience, he created diversity by design
Wow.
on purpose. So we have to, because if you buy into God, you have
Oh yeah.
to believe then that there was a reason why he created diversity in
Yes.
humanity, that there is a value, that there is something to be learned from the experiences of a Black woman or a white male or a transgender woman or right or someone who has that there is a reason why we were created by design to be diverse.
Wow.
And so, that being said, my hope is for those who may not be the intended audience that you are picking up on this book because you are taking a posture of learning and you're saying, I recognize that there is something about this experience that I may not know, but perhaps I should,
Yeah.
right? Maybe I need to know something about this. I think I do because we all win when we are all well.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's good.
You like
You make
that?
Did you make that up? That's
I
good.
did. That was just
We
off the top of my
Oh
head.
my gosh, we all win when we are all well.
We all win when we are all well. You like that, Kary?
Listen, man, that I'm gonna write that down. Get my pen right here. That's good.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll leave it there
Well,
because
I'll
I
tell
don't
you
think
what.
anything I'm gonna say after that is gonna be as good as that. If you think that's good, I'm gonna leave it there.
That's really good. Ooh, that's good. So I love that. We all win when we are all well. That's good. And I'll tell you what, I like you because
You,
well, I'll
you.
tell you what, since you and I have such a trust and authenticity with each other, I'll tell you what, just because I talk to them every day, white males are scared to talk about this. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because they feel like anything they say will be misconstrued as you're ignorant, you're stupid, you're blind, you're dumb, like, and so they just don't talk.
Mm-hmm.
And and there's guys that would say that about just marriage in general, like, just don't talk,
Yeah.
that way you can't be wrong, you know. I'm not
Have
saying
you been
that's
talking to my husband? He's
there
like,
you go.
hey,
There
I'm
you
gonna
go.
just go with whatever she says.
That's right. So
That's funny.
so I would say I would challenge my brothers, um, white or black or any color. Like, I would say, listen, it's worth entering the conversation. Um, being part of the conversation versus opting out, I think, is biblical. It is emotionally intelligent. Um, I know that on my small team, I have a amazing black woman named Tanisha, who is one of our employees. So
Mm-hmm.
out of I don't know, out of 7 employees, maybe 8, let's say 8 employees, one's a guy. So 7 are women. And one's a black woman. And I'm all about diversity. In fact, on the leadership team, we have one guy. That's it. So I love what you're saying, and I think, how can we all be better? I mean, one is definitely get your book, but how can we be better to have these conversations?
Sure. Thank you for that question. It's such an important question. And, I think so. I'm going to draw my previous experience as a professor. I taught counseling at the University of New Orleans. And so a lot of our students came in with some of the same challenges as those of your friends, your brothers,
Very
right?
specific.
That,
Yeah.
right? Because we were all socialized with certain beliefs about the other,
Mm,
about the thems, whoever the thems are. We all have thems,
yeah.
and part of I'm going to try to answer this and be respectful of the time, but part of the reason why it can be difficult in those moments is there's a bit of sometimes shaming that happens, right? We talk a lot about guilt. Guilt is I've done bad, shame is I am bad.
Ooh, that's good.
The
Yeah.
problem with shame, which is what folks often feel
Hmm.
trying to enter those conversations, because again, Robin DiAngelo in her book, I think it's White Privilege, which I would
Oh yeah.
encourage many, if you haven't, to get it. I think it's very good. Um, there's a lot of talk, even in the literature, about white guilt, right? Which is this sense of I've done bad, which is what makes it hard for a lot of people to have those conversations because most of us want to believe we're good people, right? And I think that's a divine thing because I think God is good and created us to be good. So
Yeah.
I think there is an inherent desire to be good. And
Yeah.
if we think we're bad, that feels bad. But guilt is something that, while not incredibly useful, you can do something with.
Mm,
The problem, though, is shame. Shame is immobilizing because shame says guilt is I've done bad, shame is I am bad.
yeah.
That there is something wrong with me as a person.
Mm,
And it's when we feel shame, it's harder to engage in those conversations. And oftentimes people shut down. But the problem, as D'Angelo talks about in the book, is not participating is still complicity, right? You're still
Mm,
complicit in the very thing that perhaps you are trying to avoid being guilty of. And so I think, if I may answer the question, kind of circling back to the question, is I think it is fair for one of my favorite professors said this when I was in the doc program at UNC Charlotte. She said, "We were all born babies." That
mm,
doesn't seem incredibly profound, but if you do the thing that you mentioned you did earlier, which is you had this initial thought and then you allowed yourself to keep thinking,
mm,
and then you got to a place of, I think you were talking about your wife. Oh, I do. You kept
yeah,
thinking, right?
yeah.
If you have an initial thought, we were all born babies, but if you keep thinking,
Oh, yeah.
what does that mean?
It means that
There's a
all racism was uh, taught.
and everything, right? That there are the things that we are born with; those are the biological dispositions. But there's, we have passed the nature nurture argument. We know a lot about how we come to be is through socialization.
Sure.
And so if you can learn a thing, you can also unlearn it.
Mm,
But part of the unlearning is a willingness to be open, a willingness to be vulnerable, a willingness to be courageous about what you might find.
wow.
And a lot of what keeps us from going in, checking in, searching within, is that we're afraid of what we're going to find,
Mm,
right? And I
that's
think if we can be open to the fact that, I'll use myself as an example. If I can be open to the fact that as an able bodied person, I have missed some opportunities to leverage my privilege, I have benefited from if I can be open to that little t truth,
yes.
it allows me to say, okay, that
Yep.
wasn't good, but I have an opportunity to do better next time.
Yep.
That gives me the motivation to push forward.
Yep.
So, openness, willingness to go within and
Mm,
be courageous to see what you might find, but then the courage
yep. Yep.
to do something different, because when we all win, when we're well, right?
Yeah. Yes.
If I believe that there is an interdependence, because part
Hmm.
of our American identity is individualism, eh, by design, all of our body parts work interdependently
Yes.
by design, right? Something
Right.
happens if my hearing isn't well. Something happens by design.
Yes.
Interdependence is the design. So
Mm,
if I believe then that I am equally impacted, it maybe not equally, but I am also impacted when one member of the body
that's good.
is hurting,
Yep.
then come, if I could say it, come hell or high water, I'm going to figure out a way
Yep.
to certainly not contribute to it, if
Yep.
not help the cause.
Yep.
Is that a fair response?
Oh, that's great. That's great. And in fact, I love your, you know, we share that faith background because it talks about how we are one body, and we give focus and importance to one over the other. But yeah, if you jack up your little pinky finger, man, you're gonna have a bad day. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Um,
Can I
I
say something real quick
go for it.
before we move?
Go for it.
Jesus cared about the one. He cared about the one.
Yep.
When he would be on his way to
Yes.
perform miracles for some,
Yes.
he stopped for the one.
Yep.
He stopped for the blind man. He
Yep.
stopped for the woman with the issue. He cared about the one.
Yep.
So we have to be careful what we say we believe,
Oh, that's good.
because most people believe what you say you believe by your behavior.
Yep.
So if you lay claim to God, I better see God in you.
No, that's good.
Because if I don't, then I'm going to struggle with, do you actually believe what you say you believe, or do you want to perform what you believe?
That's good.
God don't want us to perform. He wants
Yeah.
us to embody,
Yep.
right?
I love
So
that.
okay, that's it. All right, I'm done.
That's good.
I'm
No, no,
done
that's good.
now.
You know, a few minutes ago, you gave an example that you tell me, maybe this is a bad example, but
That's okay. Let's go for it.
it resonates with me. So I had, rotator cuff and labrum surgery, and there's a certain type of cast you wear when you have that. It's very obvious because you have to literally for 6 weeks have your arm like this. Here, let me show the better view here. So for 6 weeks, you gotta just be like that.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm,
and
mm.
and there's a certain cast that you have. When I'm out in public, because I went through that, the moment I see somebody with that cast, I immediately look at that person. I'm like, oh man, you must have had labrum surgery. Here, let me get that door for you.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying? So what I'm hearing you say, you didn't use this analogy, but I'm going to. If I read your book and if I start inviting your experience into my awareness, I will then share and empathize and also then not only connect with you, but it will also allow me to put that empathy into action. And
Yes.
it's not, oh, poor you, look at your shoulder. No,
No.
it's I value you and I understand somewhat of what you must feel, although I don't understand exactly. And therefore I'm going to take action. Is that
Mhm.
is that is that a bad analogy or is that a good one? I don't
It's
know.
not. It's not a bad analogy, but I will say it's both and, because
Mhm.
in your description, in your analogy, there was a seeing that happened that didn't happen before. You
Interesting.
were able to see the individual who
Hmm.
you believed experienced the same type of injury, and right, and so there was a seeing that happened that didn't happen before. and
Interesting.
and in doing so, I believe, you didn't say this, but I think this is true, this is just as a space that I've occupied, in seeing that other person, you also come to see yourself better.
Well,
And
that's
so it's not just about seeing and empathizing with my humanity, it's also about seeing and empathizing and understanding your own, and that together our shared humanity is interdependent, and it matters what happens to one member
that's good.
of our body,
That's
right?
good.
It matters. You might not care about all the violence because it's not happening in your community. But now you're inundated with it on the news. You can't even watch the news now because now your viewing is inundated with what's happening, right?
Mm.
So,
It
does that
affects
make
us
sense?
all. It
It
affects
affects
us all.
us.
Yeah,
That's the point.
I like
It's
it.
not just about seeing me, it's about seeing me better, but also seeing yourself
Oh,
and
that's good.
seeing the we
That's good.
through me.
That's good. So last thing I'll say, um, and then I know we got to wrap it up because
Yes.
I got something else here, but
Yes.
I gotta share one other thing you taught me today. When I stereotype people, then I don't have to interact with them. If I stereotype you, then I don't have to get to know you because I already say, oh, well, look, that's a black woman. Okay, great. That's a category of a person rather than she's someone worthy of being known. So I think that's another byproduct of your book that I'm hearing. You shatter the stereotype or you take us into the stereotype or extract the stereotype so that we can see the individual instead of just the class. Is that fair?
I think it is fair. I think seeing is important.
That's good.
I think if we can boil it down to the impact of seeing,
I like that.
and specifically seeing one's humanity
That's good.
as
That's
both
good.
individual and collective,
Yeah.
then you get it. Yeah.
And I like that because in the Old Testament, there was that woman Hagar who was kind of mistreated and used to, just have a kid with. and God shows up and she says, she renames God the God who sees. And I love you've brought this up so much today. Seeing.
Mhm.
And I think that's what your book is, the gift. Your book is a gift for us to see
Indeed.
someone else, but then, like you just shared, ourselves. That's
Absolutely.
huge. Folks, you got to get her book, Playing a New Game. Check it out. There's Dr. Wilborn. Thank you for the gift of today. I thought you'd deliver an A, you delivered an A+.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So folks, pre-order her book right now, as well as the other speakers. You'll get a ton of bonuses, but much more than that, you'll be a better human. You just will. So thanks for being here, Dr. Will.